Hey everyone, and welcome to Laser Source, the #1 laser engraving podcast. Whether you're just getting into lasers or you're trying to level up and grow your laser business that exists already, we're going to cover all of the latest tips and tricks, new techniques, new technologies, and more, as well as getting the perspective and experience from other laser engraving professionals through interviews and hangout sessions. So if you are interested at all in laser engraving, regardless of your skill level, this is exactly the place you want to be. Every single week, we cover new topics and perspectives to make sure that you have a well-rounded understanding of what's going on in the laser world. So sit back, relax, and get ready to learn, because we're going to cover a bunch of new stuff, and we're getting started right now. Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Laser Source podcast, the #1 podcast. If you're looking to grow or scale your laser business, grow and scale your laser business is one of the massive things that we're going to be covering today, like very specifically. A lot of episodes we kind of wander off into weird kind of corners of the laser world and things that are going on in our shops, but we're hyper focused on upping our game and leveling up today, because we are being joined by Alex Campbell, who owns Etchified. How's it going, Alex?
Oh, it's great. Thanks for having me on the podcast.
It's so great to have you here, man. I'm so excited to tap your knowledge. You've got so much in there. This is actually going to be a 2-part episode because Alex just has so much to share. But before we get into all that, I do just want to say hey to my other fellow hosts here. So we've got Tony. What's up? I like your Master of Coins badge there. That's very fancy.
I try over here.
I like it. And you got the blue light too. You're like stepping it up.
You're matching it up, man.
You got things going on. We got Gio here. What's up, Gio? How's it going, man?
Morning. How's it going?
Good morning. And Lithgow is joining us from Australia again. What's up, Lithgow?
Good evening, gentlemen.
Welcome back. It's great to have you. So, Alex, so Tony won't shut up about asking me about your origin story. So before we get into all of your amazing tips and tricks and stuff like that, I really want to hear this, because he hasn't given me any. It hasn't been spoiled for me. No, I'm still a completely fresh set of ears. So I'm really looking forward to why this? How did you get here? What were you doing before? Can you touch on that for us a little bit?
Yeah, sure. Well, so my journey to running a laser engraving business hasn't been a straightforward path, really. And then I would say that there's not any path that I would say that is the right way to get here. But basically, my entire life, I've had sort of 2 core features about what I do, right? So there's been making. Always building and designing and making things, as well as then an entrepreneurial spirit. I mean, when I was 7 years old, we'd go across the street. There was a gas station across the street, and they sold cans of pop for 25 cents. We would go fill up a cooler, drive around the neighborhood, pulling my brother in a wagon, and we'd go and sell cookies and pops at a markup to the construction workers that were at the construction sites, right? So, I mean, it's been just ingrained in me ever since I've been a kid. Now, as an adult, I was really focused when I came out of high school, and I wanted to be a paramedic. When I was 12 years old, I totally just decided, I'm going to be a paramedic. I was actually doing first aid competitions and stuff through Scouts, and hyper focused on that through high school, probably almost to a fault, because I sort of didn't explore the engineering side of what I was really interested in. If I was to go back, I probably would have gone into some sort of engineering. Right. Although I know a lot of miserable engineers now, though. So, but yeah. So I became a paramedic right out of high school. Before I was even old enough to take the first courses, I was actually taking courses when I was 17 years old. I just sort of was oh, they didn't even ask that if I was 18 or not, so I just took the courses and became a paramedic at 20 years old. And that's it's been a great career, right? At 20 years old, when you're out, you're working in Alberta. Alberta is a massive province, right? It's 1,600 kilometers, or 1,000 miles from north to south. Right. And most people will go and work in rural Alberta. And so I was able to go get a job in rural Alberta, have lots of fun. Then eventually everyone sort of moves towards the cities because that's where the pay and the working conditions and the equipment and everything is better. And then worked in the city. So I worked on the front lines as a paramedic for about 8 or 9 years. And then I actually got into an opportunity came up where I was able to become a clinical educator. So for 5 years, I specialized in actually video production and e-learning. So a lot of like technical skills there, right? But huge learning curve, right? So, I mean, I went in knowing nothing about video and then, basically ran a media department where we were doing photography and videography for 5 years. And then after that, I actually became a public education officer. So, another great job, right? I mean, literally my job was going to elementary schools and teaching kids about 911 safety.
Wow.
Right. So, I mean, it was just like super fun, great job, lots of experience in communications, public speaking. But then COVID hit, right? So, during COVID, I started developing my business, but we'll sort of come back to that. Now, in the business side of things, since about 2007, so, like 14 years now, I've had some sort of side gig going pretty much all the time. So originally, I actually designed and manufactured some Volkswagen performance parts. I had a Volkswagen diesel, and I built like little power boxes that tricked the computer into giving it more fuel and more boost. So you'd have these like little rocket Volkswagen Golfs. I did that for a while, and that sort of fizzled out for me. Just something I lost interest in. But then I really got into photography. Spent several years, about 7 years, I think, as a wedding photographer. Shooting weddings. I mean, there was years I shot 14 weddings. So between me and then I had a really good friend who is also a paramedic firefighter that was sort of my photography partner. And between us, we shot like 60 weddings over the course of several years, right? So then, just completely different from what I'm doing now. Right. And then after that, I really got into making. So 2017, I actually built my first CNC router. So it was something that I'd always been interested in. But then there's this maker system called Open Builds that allowed me to start building, build a CNC router, right? And it got to the point, I think it's where laser engraving is now, where it was easy enough to buy the components and sort of source all the components, but then put it together. And then there's enough, YouTube content coming out on how to actually run the machines, how to build them. So I did that. And then, within a year, I bought, an industrial, like 4 foot by 8 foot vacuum table, CNC router with a tool changer. And I was really focusing on personalized signs. So, like I was taking these pieces of live edge walnut and making these just absolutely gorgeous live edge signs, shipping them all over the world through an Etsy store, which I think is honestly an awesome platform for anyone who's looking into getting into selling because of how cheap and accessible it is compared to everything else. People complain about 30-cent listing fees, but it's like that's nothing in the website world, right?
Right.
And the customers are cheap to get on Etsy. So I was selling those signs, and then literally yesterday was the 1 year anniversary to me finding this shop. So in Edmonton, they have a really neat shop called Timber, and I'll give them a lot of credit for basically being that bridge to me being able to leave my full-time job. And I sort of, throughout COVID, of course, I have a huge 1390 like red sail 100 watts laser reader controller, awesome machine. It's been nothing but great for me. And I bought that actually a while ago, and I was cutting masks, and this guy showed up in my garage. I was cutting masks, like thousands of masks, but I mean, the laser cutter, I could cut in an hour what it would take someone, days and days with some of the complex shapes of masks that people were making. So I was cutting thousands of masks, and this guy shows up in my garage, and he's like, "Oh, what do you do here?" And I was like, "Well, I just do this and this and this." And he said, "Oh, you need to check out this place that I rent space in." So it was actually this co-working space in Edmonton, and they have essentially a fully built out professional wood shop. And I was actually in a part of the building that had a guy that makes like bespoke like $2,000 light fixtures that are in like Google and Microsoft buy them from him for their buildings and like hotels and stuff. Just super high end stuff. But there was like a guy that did perfume in there, and there was like a guy that made custom like like boutique children's toys. So it was a really great place to like, learn about things. But basically in there, I really started developing the tumbler business, and then it just sort of started growing and growing and growing, to the point of where, I was able to move into my own shop about 2 months ago. Now, my laser engraving journey is one that starts, like so many other people. So I had the CNC router, and I'm like, there's got to be a faster and easier way to do this, like make things than with the CNC router, right? Because it's awesome for big things, but like making little intricate parts and stuff. And actually, I also owned a photo booth company as well, so I designed and built a bunch of photo booths. And actually, I'm actually building a photo booth for one of my friends who's a DJ right now. It's like an iPad photo booth. But so I've built about 7 photo booths over the years as well. But I found that like on the CNC router, like cutting and like designing all the small parts was really difficult. So I'm like, I want to get a laser cutter. So lo and behold, I was a brief owner of a Glowforge. So don't hold it against me. But like literally the day after I got the Glowforge, I'm like, it was like wah wah. Like I was like, I see all the people doing things fast. Like, how come this thing doesn't do that fast, right? So then, like, don't get me wrong. If someone's like a crafter mom that has no interest in learning how to like align mirrors or anything, and they just want to like, make cute earrings or something like that, honestly, perfect machine, right? Like don't import a machine from China if you are not willing to do this stuff, right? So I think the Glowforge definitely has a place in the market, but I was a guy that had just, I owned an industrial CNC router. I just, built my own CNC machine and stuff like that. I'm like, okay, I think I can handle one of these Chinese lasers. And I'll give a lot of credits to, to Lightburn, because Lightburn is honestly, basically like one of the major reasons that I think so many people are able to get into laser engraving, because it's so accessible, right? I mean, I think it's, it's better than the software that some of the $50,000 machines are running on. So I give a lot of credit to them. Yeah. So, I bought that. And then, last year, so during COVID, the first year I started doing tumblers, Father's Day came around, and I sort of put a Facebook marketplace post, as I think a lot of people start off at. And, all these people were like, oh yeah, I want these tumblers. But what I found was that, like, there's a ceiling to how much you can charge for those things, right? Someone's not going to pay $150 for a personalized tumbler, right? They'll go somewhere else. And I mean, that's I think the bottom line to a lot of the stuff that any of us are making, is that at some point it becomes a commodity, right? Where someone will just say, okay, this is too expensive for me, or I don't like the customer service here. I can go down the road and get one of these, right? Now, so I really got into the tumblers, and once again, I was like, just from like the CNC router to the laser world, I was like, okay, there's got to be a better way to do these tumblers. So I did a bunch of research and came across Radian Laser. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with Radian Laser. Like, it's actually a US-based outfit. You guys, if you're into Galvo lasers, Google, like after we're done here, Google Radian Laser. They are out of the US. They're out of California. And they're just like, they're like a Thunder Laser, a Boss Laser, or whatever. Like, they bring in they're manufactured by CK Laser, but they bring it in, and then they actually add a whole bunch of accessories and stuff onto them. So I actually started off by talking to like Radian Laser, and then there's another one in they have a Canadian office called Keyence. I don't know if that's how you say it, but
Keyence,
they also,
sure, that's a big name.
They also do the 3D dynamic galvanometer lasers.
Yep.
So after seeing some videos of like the dynamic galvo lasers that will like just like engrave a tumbler flat, I was like, okay, I want to see how much those are. Talk to Radian Laser, they start at $75,000 US. Talk to Keyence, like, entry level is like, $50,000 Canadian for like a 30 watt, and I'm like, okay, that's not where I need to go. So did some more poking around, and I ended up buying my 60 watt Galvo from OV Laser. They're great to deal with. They sort of specialize in fiber laser, actually. But I bought my 60 watt Galvo from them with just an awesome, like I've shown you pictures, Alex, of that like little rotary. It's like a spring loaded rotary that actually clamps the cup from each end. Super repeatable. And I mean, I engraved on that 60 watt Galvo laser, over 10,000 cups, right? So as my business started growing, though, I was like, okay, well, like, what's the next step? How do I scale this? And, in the tumbler game, it all comes down to, I always drool. I've much, some of the Radian Laser videos have like 1,000 views. I'm probably like 700 of them, I think, on some of their videos. About their system, right? So I kept seeing the system where you'd load a bunch of cups in, and then it would rotate a cup, and then you can load and unload the cups while it's engraving another one, and it's engraving at like blazing speed, right? So, once again, started poking around and doing my research on it, and found out, that's when I actually found out from a guy named Chris Bratton. He's really active in like the Facebook laser engraving community. And I found out from him that these radiant lasers are actually manufactured by CK Laser in China. So he gave me a contact for CK Laser, and then I was able to start chatting with them and basically spec out and have this laser over here built for me. So now I'm running this one. It's 180 watts laser, which honestly might be overkill. I think 100 watts would probably be more than enough for what I'm doing. Yeah. And 180 watts dynamic focus. So it has about 25 millimeters of dynamic focus. So that means that from like the lowest point to the highest point in focus would be 25 millimeters of actual dynamic range. But because the focal length is so long, so this laser, so I mean, we talk about 300 focal length as being a long focal length. This one, by the way it's built, this has a 500 millimeter focal length.
Wow.
And the engraving area is 400 by 400, and I can actually adjust that. If I lose a bit of resolution, I can actually adjust that to a 500 by 500 millimeter, like 18 by 18 inch engraving area. So having 180 watts over those areas, right? And the dynamic Galvos, the difference with them is that not only can they 3D focus, but over a large area is because they can actually shift the focus. Because as you've explained several times on your live stream and on the YouTube episodes, Alex, is that the distance from the Galvo head is way different out at the edges of your piece. So because it can dynamically focus, it can actually get out to the edges. So these are actually used a lot in like the shoemaking industry. So there's videos like, if you go into like the depths of, Galvo laser YouTube, there's videos of like shoe manufacturers and stuff using like these like, 150 plus watt lasers. And they're, doing all of the perforations for like doing leather shoes, like athletic wear where there's like little cutouts in athletic wear and stuff like that. So they put a sheet on and it's going, and it's just like flame shooting, smoke everywhere. But the speed at which you can do this with is just unreal. So that's basically how I got to, owning this laser and sort of running the business.
What an insane story. I feel like the first time I've ever been in like hyper speed in like Star Wars, that's just like thrust past me. It was full of surprises too. What a great story, man. That was fascinating. Every time he opens his mouth, he's just like, Alex is like, yeah. And then I got into, and then I'm like,
dude,
I'm like waiting, and he's like, custom Volkswagen parts, and I'm like, oh my god!
I told you,
like
man.
every time.
It's crazy.
Wow, that's crazy. What a story. That giant, the big one, the big boy, that thing blows my mind. So I don't know if you can or are willing to share this, and if you're not, that's okay. But like when you I've seen it on the tumblers, it like starts engraving on the top, and like that's all good and fine, and then as it starts to wrap, don't you get like the stretching as it like wraps down the like almost to the side of it? Isn't that kind of like those lines would be thicker because it's kind of sheeting off more, where if that same line was on top, it would be like narrow. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So built into, so my laser runs on EZCAD3, or a version of EZCAD. They call it 3D laser software, but it's EZCAD3. It's just reskinned,
Sure.
right? And in EZCAD3, if you have the 3D module active, it actually allows you to bind your engraving to a 3D object. So a Yeti. So I'm drinking out of one of my beautiful testing cups here. But a Yeti is actually or a tumbler is cone shaped, right? So it actually has a bit of a taper to it. So you can actually program in a cone that has a top diameter, bottom diameter, and then a length, and it will actually wrap the object. Now the problem, kind of one of the crummy things is it'll only wrap vectors. I can't wrap it won't let me wrap a bitmap, but you can wrap it. So if you had like a sphere, so if you had like a hemisphere, you could actually program in a hemisphere, a cylinder. So when I'm doing like straight sided bottles or like skinny tumblers or like can holders, those are just a cylinder. So you just program in the diameter of the cylinder or the parameters of the cone, and and like we just have cheat sheets, right? You can actually probably see like right underneath the computer monitor, there's like cheat sheets there. So we just have all those sort of cheat sheets sitting there for what our settings are. And then it 3D, dynamically, wraps it. So that's
like
sort of how that
adjusts
works.
for that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow,
it adjusts
that's
for that,
crazy.
right? And even when engraving flat, if you have like a, like let's say like a fiber or a Galvo CO2 that has like a long enough lens, you can actually use in EZCAD2. There's something called project mark that actually takes into account that cylindrical, the cylindricity of an object, I guess.
Right.
So basically, you can program in that this object has a diameter of 88 millimeters, and it will actually compensate the edges of how the edges would compress. The other big one is wine tumblers. Like, I don't know if you guys have ever tried to engrave wine tumblers, but everything comes out like it's fat on the bottom. This will, if you program in the taper of a wine tumbler, it will actually compensate. So when you look at it straight on, it looks like if you engraved a square, if you looked at it straight on, it would be a square. And if you turn it to the side, it's all warped because of how it has to wrap around the cup. But it works really great.
So, I mean, when you were figuring this all out, did you just say like, screw it, I'm locking myself in the shop for a week and like just start experimenting with all of these things? Or did you have resources that kind of helped you when you were trying to figure it out?
A little bit. The resources for EZCAD3, especially like the 3D part of EZCAD3, are pretty scant. So there's like, a couple unnarrated Chinese videos of people showing how to do it. And then there is a few videos by Radian Laser on how to bind a 3D object. And some other cool things you can do is actually you can even import an STL file. So like, if all those in the 3D printing world know that like an STL file is like a mesh, a 3D mesh. You can actually import a 3D mesh and have that put in. Another cool thing is if you're doing a lot of flat engraving is that EZCAD3, you can actually even put in you can put a projector in your booth to actually project the image of what you're going to engrave. Your engraving area, you can actually project it using a projector onto the area. So that's just one of the features in EZCAD3. It's kind of pretty cool.
That's amazing.
But yeah, so anyways, so the learning, I sort of knew, right? I'd watched enough YouTube content and I was familiar enough with EZCAD2. But when I got this laser, I literally had the next day the start of a 300-piece run with it. So I basically just sort of like as fast as I could, just got it like up and running, and it came ready to go out of the box. I mean, the quality of this laser is unbelievable. Like, I see some people that buy, machines from wherever they are, they're sourced from wherever, like off-brand, no-name machines, and they show up and the electrical system's a nightmare. Like, this machine is stout, right? Like, everything, like all the bolts are Loctited. It's, all the wiring is just super clean. There's a lot of like custom PCBs in there. Now, the disadvantage of that, of course, is that user serviceability is probably pretty low, but everything, all the indications I have is, CK is like a really reputable industrial laser manufacturer, and they'll give you the support if you need it, right? So,
right.
But yeah, so I had a 300-piece order to run, like literally like the day after I got this thing. So I just sort of, pulled a late night. I think the day I got the laser was about an 18-hour day. And then, the next day I ran, 200 pieces on it, with dynamic text actually. So I was actually loading a name every time I hit F2, it was loading another name in, because
you really you were pushed into a corner and you're like, it's time to go. Like, you had to just do it.
Oh yeah.
You had
it's
to
just
just
like
figure it out.
Jump in the deep end and go for it, right?
Yeah. So I was actually planning on having the first episode that we had you on talking about more of the business stuff, but it seems like we very quickly no. We very quickly slipped into like EZCAD stuff. So I'm gonna just flip it, and we'll talk about business later because we're in it now. We're knee deep. So you brought up to me when we were chatting before the show that you definitely believe there are pitfalls that people could be falling in if they're looking for a similar setup. And you might have some warnings for people, that might be looking for something like this or mucking around in these waters. What kind of stuff would you definitely say to avoid? What kind of things? What are red flags? What are we looking out for?
Yeah. So on the Discord, I've actually been chatting back and forth with a few people about, getting into the tumbler engraving and the Galvo world. And my first piece of advice is don't buy a Galvo. You know, like it's a very specialized piece of equipment, especially the CO2 galvos. Like I know, Alex, that you've been, you know, sort of finding out that there's, you know, some limitations to the galvos, right? So my recommendation, if someone is interested in getting into the tumbler business, especially if you haven't done market research or you aren't already selling them, buy a good quality gantry CO2 laser and buy the best rotary you can get your hands on. You know, I know that the Rotoboss and the Pyburn are very popular rotaries. Buy the best rotary. You can buy a gantry laser. 60 to 80 watts is more than enough to do tumblers. Buy the best rotary you can get your hands on and go to town, right? That will honestly, I bet there, you know, for every person that owns a gantry or a Galvo style CO2, there's probably 50 people engraving tumblers and selling them on a gantry laser. So that's my first piece of advice.
6 minutes done.
Yeah. So
do you still have your gantry, or did you get rid of it when you?
No, I use
did you
it.
Kind of like upgrade through it.
Oh yeah. No, my gantry. You know, I have it. I use it all the time still. Actually, right now, what I use it for the most is sort of like quick one-off jobs that I you know, don't set up. And actually, just the other day was the first time I finally got around to setting up some jigs and stuff like that to actually set up a platform in here, because the tumbler system that rotates inside my machine is very finicky to set up. So I actually built a platform that sits on top of that. So I can put like flat objects, like I'm doing cake pans. I do a lot of like wooden boards and charcuterie boards and stuff. So now I can run them in this machine. So the gantry style laser, I'd say I use mostly for making jigs, and then you know, sort of custom jobs as they come in. But like more and more, I'm taking less, like especially custom cutting jobs. Like I'm really avoiding custom cutting jobs. Those are hard to make money on. But I still have it set up. I have the rotary for it. I still have my smaller Galvo CO2 laser for redundancy as well.
So your setup's very like modular. You have things, and they have a job that they do. It's not like one or the other. You're not picking one machine over the other. You have a spread, and they have their place in your shop.
Yeah, yeah, for sure, right? So you know, and basically. I have, you know, on this machine, this is set up mostly for tumblers, right? We're getting into a little bit of that modularity, right? And really, you know, this is set up as a production cell. Like over here, I have my, you know, my computers that have like our ordering system. We have our shipping printer. Under here is boxes. Like an order comes in and it leaves this cell with a shipping label on it, right? And then the Galvo, the smaller Galvo CO2, I still use that quite a bit for like small, like production jobs. So for instance, I have a guy coming in with 150 cutting boards that he's made. We're going to burn a logo on the side of them, right? So like so fast, you know, just sit there, foot pedal, you know, burn them. It's a 5-second engrave, right, on that one.
Right.
Now, so sorry, I go back to pitfalls about buying a you know, a laser, right? So, so the other pitfalls I would say, like if someone wants to get into the Galvo CO2 game, is you know, a 30-watt fiber laser is pretty capable machine. A 30-watt Galvo laser is like, you know, it's usable if you get like a small enough lens, but it's definitely not a comparable laser, right? Like as far as like power density, because the spot size on a CO2 is like 10 times the size of on a fiber laser, right? So your actual power density is already diminished. So, you know, a 30-watt laser, you know, CO2 laser, unless you're running a pretty small lens, is not going to have a lot of power density, and you're probably not going to be happy with it, right?
I'm the prime candidate of the example over here, because we picked up our 30-watt Galvo CO2, and it was the first thing I noticed, and it's driving me nuts, is just the spot size. So you excuse me, you were actually telling me, like, not only to move down to a smaller lens, but maybe if we could just take like a really quick beat, and you could explain the beam expander situation and the mirrors and the head, and you need different heads and different beam expander. What's that all about? Because you don't ever hear people talk about that when we're talking about fiber. Even though I know fiber utilizes some of that same tech, it's not as big of a deal because the spot size is so much bigger. It seems really important here. Can you touch on that real quick?
Yeah. Now, in lens theory, there's the calculation for final spot size. Actually, one of the inputs for the spot size is actually the diameter coming into the lens. So the diameter of the beam coming into the final lens the larger it is, the smaller the final spot size is. And it's very counterintuitive. But in the Galvo laser world, if you get into like a 20 millimeter head or a 30 millimeter head, like a 10 millimeter head, pretty much everyone out there that has a fiber laser will have a 10 millimeter head on their fiber laser, right? Like they're small, they're compact. A 20 millimeter head though, for a CO2 Galvo makes a world of difference, because the beam can be twice the diameter, so you can actually get twice the half the beam size, which is actually like multiple times, like 4 or 5 times the actual beam intensity by stepping up to a 20 millimeter head. So I was actually like literally on the Discord, I was chatting back and forth with someone last night, and I said, if you want to buy, they were asking about tumblers, and I'm like, if you want to buy a CO2 Galvo laser, don't buy less than 60 watts, and don't buy anything that doesn't have a 20 millimeter head. If someone's trying to sell you a 10 millimeter head, say, no, thank you. I'll move on to the next person, because a 20 millimeter head is all the difference in the world. I had my laser for, I don't know, 4 days before I went on AliExpress and bought a 20 millimeter head. It came with 10 millimeter head. And luckily I was able to just figure out that was what my problem was, right? Because I got it and I was like, why won't this thing engrave a tumbler? Like, it's a 60 watt laser. I'm engraving on my gantry laser. I'm engraving using maybe 30 watts. So 60 watts should be more than enough, but it's all comes down to the power density, right?
Right. So switching out the head isn't enough though. We also need to look at the beam expander. So you have to get a beam expander and pair that with your head, right?
Yeah, so on a CO2 laser, generally speaking, it's about a 2.2 millimeter beam coming out of the laser source. Okay. And if you have a 20 millimeter head, so let's say 2.2 millimeter beam coming out. If you have a 10 millimeter head, you have a 4x beam expander. If you have a 20 millimeter head, you have a 6x or an 8x beam expander. I have an 8x beam expander. I've had suggestions that it might actually be too big and I'd need a 6x, but I mean, the beam expanders are like $250, so I'm not, it works, good enough that I'm going to just leave the 8X in there, but a 6X, because apparently the 8X, if I'm spreading it out too much, might be losing some of that energy density on the edges. Okay. But,
so what's the worst case scenario? Your beam diameter would be bigger than the mirror, right? That would be a really big problem. And that's why we need to upgrade our head because the larger heads have larger mirrors. So
yeah, they have larger mirrors, but with those larger mirrors, larger mirrors, larger motors to drive them. I had to change out my power supply from a 15 to a 24 volt power supply. Not hard, right? Like my Galvo head came with a 24 volt power supply, but still something you need to do.
You
consider,
have to
right?
think about it. Yeah, there's a lot of moving parts for sure. That definitely something I need to do. Sorry, I'm like 2 seconds behind and I don't know why. I've been trying to fix it, but like I definitely need to do this upgrade. Like it has to happen because you're absolutely right. The 10 millimeter head on the CO2 Galvo with I'm sure I have like a 4X. I haven't even opened it up to check, but it certainly sounds right on track. It's just not cutting it, and I would totally agree with you. Take it from me as somebody who literally just got it in the mail. It's not good enough.
Yeah, and I mean the big difference there as well. It's a fiber laser, right? I mean, I guess if people are looking for a fiber laser equivalent, imagine taking a 20 watt fiber laser and throwing a 300 millimeter focal length lens on it, and then trying to do trying to do work with it, right? Like that's what it feels like, right? You're just like, why isn't this doing its job, right? It'll burn, but it's like it's not a nice crisp line. It's very sort of fuzzy. In the CO2 gantry world, that might be the equivalent of trying to do fine engraving with like a 4-inch lens. It's just not going to work, right? So, so small lens. Like, I mean, my 60 watts machine, I have a 110 millimeter by 110 millimeter lens, so it's a 160 millimeter focal distance. That's what you need, right? And I mean, on a standard tumbler, most of them you have about 100 millimeters of engraving area on a standard tumbler, right? So I mean, you're using that full range to engrave tumblers, right? And I mean, and with that, so I mean, and if people are sort of on the fence about going with a CO2 Galvo versus a CO2 gantry laser, for one, I was spelling this out last night to someone on Discord, right? A gantry laser, for one, way more support for it, right? So you're using light burn, so much support for it. You have, way more rotary attachments available. So you got like the pi burn and the rotobots. I know the two like big ones that everyone tends to use, but even like some of the AliExpress ones, the chuck rotaries and stuff. And then the bottom line is that you can still use it to cut jigs. You can cut out things. Most people want to do something else besides engraving, right? So that could be the ability to cut and engrave. So, I mean, unless you're really committed, I can honestly say that I wouldn't recommend getting a Galvo CO2 laser unless you have a specific business case and can sell it, right? So if you're someone's like, oh, I see these cool engraved tumblers, I want to get into it. Obviously, this is the machine for me. Like, really give it some thought before you go and pull the trigger on a Galvo laser, because you need to.
With your 60 watt, you use a rotary because you don't have the 180 watts of power to get that spread around the cup without turning it, right? So you're still on rotary when you do use the 60. Is that correct?
Yeah, I do have a 200 by 200 lens for it that you can engrave a tumbler, right? So I mean, you get about 12 or 13 millimeters of focal range, but once again, even with a 20 millimeter head, I just wasn't getting the quality that I needed in the engravings, right? So, I mean, so many people want engravings that are, a millimeter tall, right? And like, the worst case scenario, as I'm sure you guys know, is like a negative space engraving, where someone wants something where it's like, a little tiny feature in a huge engraved area, right? So they want something left over. That's the toughest, right? And I'll hold this up like to show, like on some of these, like this is one of my testing cups, like the detail you can get, like, this text is 1 millimeter tall, and it's clear as day, right? So, I mean, that you can't achieve with a longer focal distance lens on one of these machines, right? If you had a 100 watt or a 150 watt machine, because anyone that's interested in lens theory, I really recommend watching Sarbar Multimedia on YouTube. You want to geek out, absolutely geek out. I've watched, probably 50, 60 hours of his content. He talks a lot about lenses, but the bottom line is when you're laser engraving, imagine using a blowtorch, right? So if you have a really powerful blowtorch, it has, a real fine cone. That tip has a lot of energy, and you can do a lot of work with that tip. But if you're holding that tip in one spot for very long, or if it's a low energy and you need to do the damage with that low spread, you're going to get a lot of spread of that beam, right? And laser beams are like that, right? Laser beams are like a cone. So if you can go really fast, you can use just the tip of that cone to get your stuff, and you can get really fine details. But if you don't have the power, or if you don't have the small off spot size, you're not going to be able to get that detail that you're wanting, right? So, and my sort of standard is I want to, on any machine I'm doing, I want to be able to write 1 millimeter tall text legibly, as well as do those negative space engravings, right? Where you have like let's say a few letters that are like a millimeter tall within a large engraved area. That's sort of like what I consider my benchmark for tuning and how I actually get my machines dialed in.
And it seems like you're definitely on board, and I can get on board with this, is that why, like, this is a whole spread of stuff that you have to worry about. And if instead of just doing that, you can just pick up a gantry CO2 and get a 1 or 2 inch lens, and you've got it just like that. And that's all there is to it. And it's much easier if you're not planning on doing hundreds of pieces right out of the gate and you haven't done the market research. Start with the gantry, because you can instantly start to get results like that with a standard rotary tool and the short focal lengths of the gantry CO2. Is that kind of the takeaway here? Is that
that's exactly it. So unless you're committed, unless you have a business case to purchase a Galvo CO2 laser, so if you're doing high volume engraving, now I mean, we're just talking about tumblers right now, but some other things that I like the Galvo CO2s are awesome for is like production of like wooden items. So you get a job that's like someone wants 1,000 wooden keychains or something. Throw like a 70 by 70 lens on it, and you're engraving one part a second, right? I mean, like it's engraving as fast as you can, right? Actually, I have a rotary platter for my machine as well. It plugs into the same port as the like tumbler rotary. And it's this big plate, and you can laser cut jigs for it. So you want to do pens, business cards, any of that stuff, it will engrave, and you can actually load and unload it while it's engraving in one station. So I had a job when I first got my 60 watt. I had a job where I was engraving coasters for a company on my slate coasters on my gantry CO2, and they're taking like a minute each, and I had 100 and some to do, and I was like, okay, there's got to be a faster way to do this. So I basically set up a little jig so I could just slot them in. They were 10 seconds on the Galvo machine, right? And the engraving was actually superior.
Right.
So there are definitely cases where it's good if you need to do high volume engraving of pretty much like anything, any organic materials. It's something you could consider, but unless you're at that place, on a Galvo CO2, you can put, a rack, you can make up jigs and put a rack in them, right, on a gantry machine, and just, walk away from it, right? So, it's just it's one of those things, right? I mean, I'd say that most people, if they went out and just bought like a, generic off the shelf 20 watt, 30 watt fiber laser, they're probably going to have some fun with it, right? If you just go out and buy an off the shelf 30 watt CO2 laser and you don't have a case to use it, you don't understand the lenses, beam expanders, head size, you're not going to have a fun time.
Right. This is really, really important information. And I want to keep going because we've got so much to cover with you. We're already at 40 minutes and I've got a bunch of things on our list that we'd worked out. It's okay. The last pitfall that I see mentioned in our kind of our show notes here was that you were saying, like, don't forget a motorized Z on a $30,000 machine. What did you mean by that note? And like, do you want to expand on that before we move on?
Yeah. So basically the machine, so my big machine, and actually both of my CO2 lasers, my CO2 Galvo lasers were spec'd out for me, right? So are custom builds, right? So the first one from OV Laser, it's a blank slate, right? You can order whatever you want. And that's sort of with the laser manufacturers, the two that I've dealt with, I find that they're very price sensitive, and they feel that the North American buyers maybe are really price sensitive. So they won't just say like, here's your list of all the things you could order, pick from that, right? It's not like buying a car where you're like, oh, I definitely want air conditioning. I live in Florida. It's a case of, if you don't ask for it, they're not going to offer it to you because they can offer you a lower price, right? So even with the rotary, like I really had to bug them. I'm like, no, I've seen you guys have this like sweet, they're trying to just offer me like a normal, chuck rotary that everyone seems to get with their lasers. I was like, no, like I've seen you guys have a cup rotary. Oh, that one. Okay. Well, that's $400. I'm like, that's cheaper than like any other, rotary if I was to buy it from the States. Right. So,
right.
But my big one, like, a perfect example, right? They offer a motorized Z-axis because I didn't specify it. And it's probably like a $200 feature or something like that. I, got the machine. So here's my like work area. So it's got a computer built into the base of it. It's got like an industrial, like 16 core, 32 gigs of RAM industrial computer built into it. And it's got the monitors off the side and stuff. The focus is on the other side of the machine, and it's a little hand wheel. And it's like so fine, you have to like sit there and crank it like 10 times to move, a millimeter, right? And so I was like, why didn't I get a motorized, like this is, $30,000 machine. Why don't I have a motorized Z-axis, right? So I ended up like 3D printing like a NEMA bracket, and basically, using a stepper motor driver and stuff like that. So I have like a little pendant now that I can actually like raise and lower the Z-axis with. There's lots of information out there on sort of how to do that, and lots of guys do that with their fiber lasers. So I ended up doing that, right? So, if you're gonna have a machine built, make sure you know exactly what you want, right? So, and for me, like the enclosure on my machine was actually, an extra $1,500 feature. But I'm like, well, if I'm going to have, a laser shop where there's people working, I need, I don't want just, 180 watt laser beam, out there, right? Because anyone who's worked in this world, it's interesting, right? Because it's not like fry your retina frequency of light, but it is like thermal heat. So as it's engraving the tumbler, as it wraps around the side, you'll get like a blast of heat in your face because it's like reflecting that, right? It's not going to like probably burn your eyeballs out. We have glasses right on top of the machine. It's not going to burn your eyeballs out or see your retinas, but it's hot, right? And it's like having that machine without an enclosure, as well as then smoke control. That would be just ridiculous, right? So you really have to know what you want and ask for all the different features on the machine when you're purchasing it, right? So, and that's why, things like the Discord, your YouTube channel, these podcasts and stuff are so valuable for people, because I think so many people just jump in, like me, buy Glowforge. Well, that was I ended up selling it for what I paid
That could
for
have
it.
been $4,000 towards your
Yeah,
Galvo CO2 setup. Yeah, totally. If you had known what you'd wanted in advance.
exactly right. So take your time, do your research, and if you're ordering from one of these manufacturers, generally speaking, it doesn't cost any more money to have a machine built. It costs you time, right? I mean, this machine, from the time I put money down to the time it was in my hands, was 6 months because of
Right.
supply chain shortages and stuff. But it's if you know what you want, you can definitely get it.
I'm so glad that you brought this up because this is one of the things that we've been struggling with. I really you've seen all my Mactron stuff. I'm like a big Mactron fanboy, and it's because you were mentioning like the wiring inside. Like you can tell, it's got like a tangible difference in quality when you actually find like a quality product manufacturer. But they have the same issue. They don't want to sell you anything that you don't ask for. And it's like really been like pulling teeth. One of the things that we've been working on with them, because I do trust them as a brand, and I try to get people to make purchases from them, is to get more options on their web. Like just give people the ability to check a box and say, I would like a 20 millimeter head, like on checkout. Like, why can't I, if I'm checking out for one of these coherent machines, why can't I check out for a 20 millimeter head or an 8x beam expander? Those should be line items. Like, people will figure it out. If they don't know, they already don't know, and they're already screwed. But if they do know, at least it gives them the flexibility to make like an appropriate purchase and be able to like kit something out. And I think there's a really big difference between seeing the option during checkout and being like, oh, there's some options, I should research these, or just having a listing that's built and ready to go and you just click add to cart and there was nothing to check along the way. One of our big successes with this, on this front was I just got Mactron to add EZCAD2 or EZCAD3 to the listing, and you can actually, like, even on 2D lasers, I was like, please give people the option to choose to pay a little bit extra and get EZCAD3 built into their machine, even for their 2D lasers, because it's newer software and so many people want it. I answer so many questions about upgrading from EZCAD2 to EZCAD3. Like, if you just give it to them out of the box, people will, that's like so much value just to have the option. So, this is another thing now. I'm going to have to go in and like have a conversation with them basically and try to get like, look, guys, like people need beam expander options when they're checking out. People need Galvo head size options when they're checking out. I think that would go a really long way in making this the buyers more informed and making the purchasing process easier. So I'm glad you brought that up, because that's like my personal thing behind the curtain that people don't see that I do over here a lot. Is like negotiating with these guys to try to make US market friendly listings, because I believe in their product, but they're not presenting it in a way that's good for the buyer. So I'm trying to rectify that, and it's just been really frustrating. So I'm glad you touched on it.
Yeah, and I think that also it's interesting, right? Because I think that we're probably in on what could be the ground floor of this, right? I mean, like the Glowforge is like a fairly like in the grand scheme of things, it's a fairly new thing, right? And having like lasers is a pretty new thing, right? And I know that for instance, there are even in the gantry CO2 world, there are some amazing machines out there, right? Like, so everyone talks about like Boss Laser and Thunder Laser and stuff like that as being like these American brands. Well, guess what? Gwiki or Gwiki or however you say the name, they're the manufacturer. They actually make the Glowforge. So, and they've actually, I don't know if you guys have noticed, they've actually ripped off the Glowforge and they have like a Gwiki Cloud laser now. That's basically like a cheaper Glowforge. They manufacture the Glowforge, right? But like Gwiki, they also make Thunder lasers, and they are like gorgeous machines. A friend of mine actually had one. He was using some space in my shop here. He brought one in, and he was basically like, he added like a air assist and stuff like that to it to help someone out. And everything about the build quality, like I have a Red Sail, which is like also a fairly well-known brand. Everything, like all the pulleys, the belt system, the wiring, everything was just like that step above. It didn't have acrylic, like the windows were actually tempered glass. They weren't acrylic, right? Like everything about the machine was just like a step above. And I think that the buying process is so tough and such an awful experience that and this segues really well into my business concept, right? But the buying process is so awful for the lasers. Everyone just wants to go onto an AliExpress, pick out 15 options that they want, hit add to cart, and have it show up by DHL, right? it's a pain in the butt to talk to the manufacturers, but honestly, if you want the best machine and the best value, you know, if someone wanted a gantry style CO2 laser and they're like, I want like a good value, I'd say hands down, go onto Alibaba, go to GWiki Factory, not like someone who's a reseller. Go talk to the GWiki Factory, give them the machines, specs of a machine you want, and get it. Like hands down, like they're super high quality machines. They come with like a Recce tube, you know, all the best components, Rudy controllers and stuff like that, and they're just like a stout machine, right? And I think that all these middlemen and the resellers like OhmTech and stuff like that, I mean, they're doing a great job of making them accessible and especially like having stock available in the US, but you know they're just basically pandering to the person who's the price buyer and not the person who's actually, you know, needs a machine for business, right? Which sort of clouds things up, right?
Unfortunately, you can't blame them either, because I feel like when a lot of people get into this, so many people that join the Discord for the very first time, they come in and they're just like, it's the race to the bottom always, you know. And it's I try to tell people, and it's like one of those things where it's you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. This is a you get what you pay for industry. You're not getting a better price than everybody else. You're getting a worse product, you know. And you have to at some point like spend money, because we're not talking about resellers and we're not talking about hand built American made machines. We're talking about two people saying they're going to give you a 30-watt JPT laser source, and one of you is charging you $1,000, and then the other guy is charging you $2,500, and you're not getting the same thing from both of those people. You know what I mean? And it just like I try so hard to tell people that like it's not a race to the bottom. You are already saving 90% of what you would be spending from an American made machine, you know, by importing from China. Don't also skimp when you're importing from China. Like you've already made those savings. So I would like, I don't know. I don't want to get off on a tangent, but I totally agree with you. Like, you know, go to a quality manufacturer that's putting out good stuff, not the no-name places, and build a machine with them, you know what I mean, and see what they can offer you. Even if you're shopping around between a couple different quality manufacturers, you know, that's one thing. But talk to those guys, talk to the names people know. We know the names for a reason, you know. So
yeah, and that was actually a big reason that I haven't been and I was so happy to find like the Laser Everything community, because on the Facebook groups, it's totally just become this, you know, someone every you know hour it seems someone's going on there and they're like, okay, I have a $400 budget and I want to cut aluminum and I want to, you know, have something I can take to a craft show and you know, and make tumblers on it, and also, you know, have it shoot out glitter, you know. And it's just like, okay, like what you're asking for literally doesn't exist. If you know, then it's just so ridiculous that, you know, like people, there's so many resources to do your research. And that's one of the things that like drives me nuts, is that, you know, so many people just, you know, are looking, you know, it's just like, give me your settings, give me your settings, give me your settings, right? It's like, okay, like so many people are just looking for that like easy answer, but if it's so much more fulfilling if you actually do your research, get the machine that's right for you, because, you know, what's right for Tony isn't necessarily right for me, or, you know, right for someone else, right? It's you have a use case. And then the other thing is that the one that like drives me nuts is that someone's like, oh, you know, if I buy this machine, how long will it take me to make my money back? It's like, well, okay, that's not how it works, right? You can make your money back.
That's a business question, not a technical question. You know, you're asking it like a technical question.
Yeah, you know, it's like,
totally.
yeah, you know, it's like, you know, you could, you know, some people are happy buying a laser and like literally never making, you know, their money back, because that's not what it's about. They're buying it because it's a fun tool. They're a maker. They want to do that, right? That's fine. But
yeah,
you know, if that's your first question, you probably need to reconsider your business case. You know, if it's like, how long will it take me? Well, that's, you know, you need to think about that, right? So
yeah, 100%. I mean, there are different lasers do different jobs. You can't do everything. Jeff Bezos can do everything. We're not Jeff Bezos. You know what I mean? You can't buy 8 lasers and have them all doing their little perfect job, and you have every capability in the world. They're not iPhones, you know, they're like specialized machines. They're specialized machines, and they all do their thing really well. And if you try to force one machine to do all of those different jobs, you're going to be disappointed with it. You know, there's a lot of, you know, we do a lot of weird experimenting and, you know, testing here, like how to engrave leather on a fiber laser. You shouldn't be engraving leather on a fiber laser. You should be engraving leather on a CO2 gantry. That's where you should be doing it, or on the Galvo if you have a reason to do it on the Galvo. But like, and I get like, I can't afford multiple machines. And I'm like, well, that's a business question now. It's like, if you can't do all of the things you want to do in your business, maybe you should focus on the things you can do, make a profit, and then move into we'll save that for part 2. But so moving on, because we have 3 more things I want to hit. We're coming up on an hour. I don't want to cut us off on an hour. We're going to go a little over, just because I do want to work through these last couple things. But you mentioned, I'm going to save the customer focused design for the very end, because that'll be a good segue into business. So just you mentioned your Lightburn workflow to EZCAD. What?
That's a good one.
Okay, so okay, so
this one's good.
yeah, okay. I just have to think about how to say this. Okay, so basically, what I found was, especially because I have a lot of user submitted artwork. So basically, that's what my business is built on, right? Is people can submit a design and be able to, have me engrave it on a cup, right? Unless you have a good, fast workflow, that doesn't work. So, when I was doing a lot of my initial stuff with Lightburn, I found a few things in Lightburn that are just like game changers, right? So for one, the trace module in Lightburn is hands down. I've used, Illustrator. I have some like very specialized software. The only other piece of software I'd probably recommend is called Vector Magic. It's actually really expensive, but it's a great piece of software. You can download a trial of it and stuff. But Vector Magic's an amazing one. It's more designed for prints, but it does like lots of multicolor stuff, lots of features. It does a really good job of figuring out like how to make something better. That's my like. Someone sends me basically like a basket case design, then I might go to Vector Magic. But Lightburn trace module is amazing. But the other thing that I think a lot of people forget about with Lightburn is that, like, let's say you're an illustrator, if you have just like a line vector file, you can't see how that's going to render on a laser. So if you have something like lines that aren't connected, you can't see that it's not filled, for instance. But Lightburn has that filled rendering option. So if you have a vector that's not connecting, so let's say you have a letter O, the middle of the O is, or it's doubled up, there's two, it's duplicated. You can see that on Lightburn because it's actually showing how a laser is going to output that. And the other final thing is that Lightburn out exports in DXF that works with EZCAD2 and EZCAD3. So you export from Lightburn in DXF, you can import it right into EZCAD2 or EZCAD3. I have never had an issue with a Lightburn exported file in either of them. Versus AI, if you don't choose the right, 15 generation old AI output or whatever, it's not going to work, right? So if you export,
I'm looking at where I didn't even know that Lightburn had image trace, let alone like advanced vector editing. Yeah. I mean, this isn't the first I'm hearing of it, but like before, maybe I really started ramping up the channel a couple months ago. I've been using Lightburn for years. And I had no idea that those kind of features were even available. I've never messed around with them ever. So
the tracer in Lightburn is unreal. So and one of the big things is that if you have a really pixelated image, it doesn't try and chase the jagged edges. It'll basically, it's a line of best fit essentially. So if you have one of those really pixelated images, it will, exactly. It'll interpolate the Béziers and it will come out with like an awesome output. Do
you find you're like resizing or rescaling things before, or are you literally taking like 100 pixel wide like thumbnails and throwing them in and getting good traces out of them?
Yep.
Wow.
So
okay,
yeah, and a little bit of that is knowing what you can get away with on like engraving a tumbler. So like I know, for instance, if you're engraving something that's 2 millimeters tall, if the little corner in a T is a little bit rounded, it's not going to show up. No one's going to know the difference, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But so it's a little bit of knowing that. But I can say that 95+% of the artwork I get, and it comes in at 300 DPI for like a 75 millimeter, so it's about 900 pixels wide. We just do a trace in Lightburn and export it. And even like, it's like Option or Alt X, Option X on a Mac, it pulls up the export window. So it's like Option X, enter your file name, enter, done. It's exported. It's ready for Lightburn. So, and then I have a system of like files, cloud files. So I use Google Drive, for instance. So when I get an order in from my website, it dumps into a Google Drive folder that I can then pull up on any computer in my shop, and then re-export that artwork back into that folder, and then it's ready to go for the laser. So a DXF.
So I've kind of a selfish question, just because I'm curious, and we're here and we're chatting. How does it handle like a color image? If you had a color image that you needed to trace, because like one of the things that I struggle with all the time, even with my super expensive fancy Photoshop and Illustrator, is people send me I get patches a lot, like actual like stitched patches. How would you like handle something like that? Have you ever gotten anything like that? That's like the worst case scenario, because there's a bunch of colors. There's a lot of little detail in the stitching. What kind of workflow would that look like with Lightburn?
Lightburn Hash, so the trace module once again in Lightburn is really awesome. So sometimes what you have to do, because it brings it in as grayscale, it doesn't even show you a color option. So when you import it into Lightburn, it shows you as grayscale. But what you can do is basically you can just sort of set, because it has like the threshold slider, of course, where it sort of picks things, but it's a live view too. It's not like Illustrator where you have to like sort of wait for it to render out and then you never know what the result's going to look like. It's giving you a live result. But then the other thing with that is that you can also then pull up the threshold. So you can like you can exclude things under a certain size. So if someone gives you a grainy image, you just say, exclude less than, 10 pixels. All the noise is gone, right? And then, it's just something you got to play around with. Like it works really good. So you just play with the different levels. If I get something that's a real basket case, I will go to Vector Magic, like I was saying, like something like that. Patches, there's actually, I've never done this, but for patches, there's people on like, on some of the Facebook groups, they'll do a patch into a vector for like $5. I wouldn't even at that point, if I was doing lots of them.
What I do now.
I probably
shout out to Joy Designers, info@joydesigners.com. I use her name's Joy, and she's like the boss queen of that stuff, and she does them for like a couple bucks, and I really like supporting her business, so I try to shout her out when I can, because she's a champ, and that's but I like doing stuff myself when I can, but when I can't, definitely outsourcing is the way to go. I'm going to keep pushing.
Okay, sure.
Because we're almost to the end. So you wanted to touch on some differences between EZCAD2 and EZCAD3 for people. And this is one of the biggest questions. I get this all the time. We really need to just sit and just publish like a real episode on this. Yeah. But you want to cover some aspects of that. And I'm really interested to hear your thoughts, because you said you use both.
Yeah. So I use EZCAD2 on my fiber laser. So that's something I haven't even talked. Like I have a fiber laser. I actually got it. I had a package deal thrown in with this one. So I'm like, so how much for a fiber laser to ship with this, right? So I got, what is probably a $10,000 machine for like $3,500. So it's like a, awesome, like little compact machine, autofocus, all that stuff. But so I use that on my fiber and my 60 watt gantry. And then this machine runs on EZCAD3. Now, both of them suck for design. Like they're like hands down, like they both, like if you think you're going to design and get away with not having an Illustrator or a Lightburn, it's not a design software, right? But the biggest difference with EZCAD3 is that EZCAD3 is a native 64-bit program, so it can use more than 4 gigabytes of RAM, and it doesn't crash as bad. So I know that EZCAD, everyone calls it Easy Crash, and like for EZCAD2, I can't tell you how many like $40 tumblers I have that halfway through it like stop. It would just like stop in the middle of engraving it, or you're trying to like load like a 1 megabyte DXF file, and it just like crashes out, and you're like, well, what the heck? Like it's like this seems like a pretty core function. Yeah. EZCAD2. So a common misconception about EZCAD2 is that EZCAD2 can't do 3D, and actually there is a 3D module. I don't know what board it is, but they actually do have. It's in the once again in the depths of like Galvo CO2 YouTube. There are some ones that show like an actual dynamic focus capability in EZCAD2, but EZCAD3 like the biggest thing I use it for is, of course, the 3D functions of it, right? And it's really cool because when I bind my vector to a 3D item, it actually will like show, and I can actually like orbit like you can in like Fusion and stuff like that. I can actually orbit and like look at like how it actually wraps around the object. It's pretty cool to see that. And then otherwise, I mean, there's some other things like in EZCAD3 that I think would be for the right people, a game changer, like the projector feature, where you can actually hook up a projector and have it project your workspace onto your actual workspace. So like, let's say, you're doing a whole bunch of stuff and you have like weird shaped items, or like, like let's say even like slate coasters or something, instead of having to like red light it, you could actually see how the image would fit onto your item, right? So there's some things like that in EZCAD3 that I think are pretty cool. But the core functions that I use, like which are, the hatch, the all the different pen settings and stuff are pretty much the same. EZCAD3, there's an advantage and a disadvantage because you can save different hatch settings. So I actually have, like, for instance, like a first pass and a second pass hatch, because lots of times I'll run 2 passes. And I mean, like, we're talking, like game changing levels of speed. Like, I mean, I regularly have items that are engraving in like 4 or 5 seconds. So if they're engraving that fast, I'll do a second pass a lot of the times. For one, because I can't even load and unload the machine that fast. But also then if I do a second pass, especially on like a black or a navy tumbler, I can get away without cleaning it. So no cleaning, like off of the laser, I give it I wipe off the dust because there'll be a little bit of dust on it, but like it's a shiny engraving, like it's into the box. So, so basically, except for the fact that most tumblers you need to like cut off a label or unbox them or something like that, like the laser engraving is actually the fastest out of all the processes, right? Yep. Now, sorry, I'm getting off on a tangent there, but the other thing with, so you can save the hatch settings on EZCAD3, which is good. However, the problem is it doesn't load a default hatch setting if you hit like Control H to do hatch. So that was my workflow on EZCAD2. Control H, enter. Like that was the hatch done, right? On EZCAD3, you actually have to select from a drop down box of your hatches, or else it won't enable. It doesn't like there might be a setting like in like some weird parameters file, some text file somewhere that like has a default hatch, but it doesn't have a default hatch, which is really annoying when you're trying to have a really fast workflow, right? Because I'm all about the keyboard shortcuts, like Control I to import, all the how to center it and stuff like that. Like it's all like so much is all about shortcuts and stuff, right? But yeah, not having the default hatch is actually really annoying. But if you are doing something like you're doing coins or like some stuff you guys do where you need to have a whole bunch of different hatch settings, that's a great feature, right? And it might, if you're not doing volume, it might actually be a really good workflow. So those are like the big differences. Yeah.
I mean, when you've got like tumblers and wood for the most part, and it's like in the fiber world, there's like 80 different materials that people are working on with the fiber lasers, and every single one of them requires 3 different hatches depending on the look that you're trying to get. So having the EZCAD3 like hatch saving parameter, that just sounds like a freaking godsend to me. That's the thing that I want the most. I'm looking forward to. I think we're gonna order an EZCAD3 board and make the swap on the fiber laser and make an episode out of that, which will be really interesting. But that's neither here nor there. Listen, wow, we're over an hour. We're at an hour and 6, so I'm gonna cut us off. But that is like it just a direct injection of knowledge from Alex Campbell here over at Etchified. I'm gonna have to re-listen to this episode like 3 times, but it's wow, just so incredible to hear your experience. I think it's radically different than most people that are listening to this right now, who very likely went like maybe Diode CO2 fiber, and just seeing your perspective where you've got this tumbler focus, you've got this batch, kind of like we're really kind of trying to do like batch jobs, and it's about speed. Just seeing things from this perspective with these new machines that we don't see very often has been just like really, really mind bending. When we come back next week, we are going to talk about the business side of things. We're going to meet businessman Alex Campbell instead of technical man Alex Campbell, and we're going to talk about how you're running your business, some different functions of it, and how you got there. So I'm really looking forward to touching base on all that. We'll probably have a little extra time during that session too, where I can open it up and actually let our other hosts here ask a couple questions. I'm sure you guys, I can see some of the gears turning, and you're just like, you've got the questions bubbling. But we had so much to cover today, so we will get to that next week. So thank you guys so much for watching. Really, really quick. Tony, where can people find what you're working on right now?
All right, so I hang out in the Discord. My handles would be Etched Ideas on all the platforms, and website's coming soon, so it'll be etchideas.com. Still in the
All right.
works.
Excellent. We'll keep an eye on that. Lithgow, what's up with you?
Lithgolights.com. That's mostly my light stuff, but a bit of laser. And also, I'm on the Discord and on Facebook, Lithgow Lights.
Excellent. Perfect. Geo?
Mostly on the Discord right now, but I've also got Instagram and YouTube under Maker Theory, MAKR Theory.
You got lucky this week, man. I haven't even had a beat to harass you about getting that first episode up, but I'm really looking forward to it. And Alex, seriously, dude, thank you so much for being on the podcast with us today. Where can people check out your work, see what you're doing?
So I'll be the first person to admit that my social media game is weak. I really focus on the website, but Etchified.com, if someone wants to see what I do and how I sort of run that sort of things, check out Etchified.com. And then on Facebook and Instagram at Etchified.
Now, I'm sure that they are going to be probably have a lot of questions if they visit Etchified.com about what's going on there, because I know we're going to touch on that and some of the features of your website in next week's episode. So hang on to those questions, guys. We're going to get into it, and we're gonna sink our teeth into that side of things next week. If you haven't already, please consider going and signing up for the Patreon. It's patreon.com/lasereverything. It supports the podcast. It supports the channel. It supports the Discord community and everything we're trying to do here. And it's really, really just the best way to support the show. You get bonus episodes every single week. So we actually just finished recording our first bonus episode before this interview. If you want to hear a little more from the guys and what's going on in their shops, the bonus episodes are funny and fun and sometimes a little bit frustrating, but it's just excellent bonus content. You also get access to live streams, fiber and CO2 parameter libraries, and a whole litany of other things that you guys have heard me talk about 1,000 times. So go do your homework on that, and rate and review the podcast. If you are listening on Apple Podcasts, it really helps us meet new people and share this information with people who really need to hear it before making a purchasing decision, especially this episode. So thank you so much for rating and reviewing. And I think that is it. I think we've done all of our housekeeping, so I'm going to go ahead and close out. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.